Look at this. No better quality for video than the in-computer camera. Am I right, ladies? I filmed a half hour of video in my phone. Took forever to upload it to Drive. Tried to upload it directly to the computer. The computer was like, hey, have you tried you're off? So I had to use Drive. I just realized I didn't do the intro. I'll get there. Only to realize that Microsoft wanted me to pay $1 for an extension in order to be able to play the files. I can already hear you, Milk. I can already hear you saying, just spend the $1, dude. No. On principle, no. So here I am. Grainy as Look, I'll learn Blender, and then I'll spend the $1. When I'm less annoyed. I haven't even bought the URL yet at the time that I'm filming this. Why? I don't know. Why did it take me a week to clean this room in order to turn the computer on? My brain is a mystery, an enigma. Just a mess. A mess. Hi. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Frankie Lord. I am a writer. I am a horror writer. I'm a weird horror writer. And if you end up liking this and you want to support me, support my writing. That's my request. I am mostly just here for attention. I want to post videos. I want to talk about things I'm interested in, particularly as they relate to horror and weird fiction and, like, just probably politics. I have a women's studies degree from a historically women's college. And I am turning into this. So I've kind of got opinions on the world. Another thing about my YouTube channel is that I am even though I was definitely on YouTube first, because I'm 33, millennial, I'm definitely like a TikToker. So we're going to do the Subway Surfer dual screens. I wanted to talk about Titane. So my friend was like, man, I love describing this movie to people. I had never heard of this movie. And so I was like, I'm going to watch it right now. And she was like, fuck yeah. And she hadn't told me anything about it. And here's the thing. I went in blind. But I guess that the advertising was really fucking upfront about what was going on. Something about me is that, like, I can predict pretty quick and pretty spot on. I don't tend to get too thrown off by red herrings, right? So, I'm going into Titane totally blind. I'm like, maybe I'm just trying to get ahead of what's weird here, but there's just a lot of tension with this car, right? So I text my friend, being funny, and I'm just like, is this movie that she falls in love with a car and has a car baby? My friend was like, I mean, it's more about the journey. And I was like, okay, you're saying that like I guessed correctly, but I was just being a silly little goose. And she was like, it's about the journey. She gets a car. She gets pregnant with a car baby. She turns into a car, kind of. And then gives birth to a car baby, but it's more baby than car. But it's car enough. I have to say that before I had seen this, I had only seen like one other French horror movie, and probably only an additional French movie period. Like, I studied French for 2 years, and I haven't seen Amelie. That's just the way I am. You know, willfully defiant. And I mean, Titane isn't a horror, right? But like, weirdo French cinema, right? The only other weirdo French film I'd seen was Incident in a Ghostland. That happened to me. So these girls and their single mom, they get a house in the booties, and they're kind of liking the house, and then some dudes break in, and they like the protagonist's mom and the protagonist's sister like in front of her. But she manages to get away. She manages to survive, and she grows up to be a very famous, very rich author, which is your first sign that there's some bullshit afoot. So she's like, you know, having all of these experiences, going back home after being gone for all these years, because she's grown up to be a very successful, very rich, the way that authors get, you know. And then it turns out that it is in fact bullshit. She is still a teenager. She is still in the basement, being Ard herself. And then some of the most transphobic and some of the most ableist you have ever seen, will ever see in your life happens. And I am saying that as somebody who lives in America and watches American legal processes. So, you know, I was a little concerned that Titane is gonna be a problem. I also need to say that technically the version of Incident in a Ghostland that I watched is American. But make this make sense to me. It is a shot-for-shot remake by the same director as the French version. Just moved to America instead of being in France. God, I hated that movie. Titane has the most batshit premise I've ever heard in my life. Just nonsense. Sometimes you have a premise for a story that is nonsense, and they're like, you know what? We're gonna lean into the nonsense. This is a nonsense movie. And Titane totally could have just been a nonsense movie. But it's French. So instead, it's really good. Like, not to say that, like, vapid movies can't be really good, right? But I'm a huge dork, so I love, like, pulling apart, like, the metaphors in media, especially when they are, like, you know, it's why I love horror. I love stories that are, oops, all metaphor. I love not directly knowing what the fuck anybody's trying to say to me. I love having to figure it out myself. And so Titane delivers. What if I told you that the car baby movie is a movie about father-daughter relationships? She spends like half of the movie living as a man, so there's obviously like a trans reading. I just don't think that's the point of the cross-dressing. Look at me. Do I look like I don't want to do the trans reading of a story? I'm like, of course I want to do the trans reading of the story, but that's just not the vibes I got from it at all. Nope, this is a movie about father-daughter relationships. I argue that in part because of the few but vital scenes we get of her with her biological father. Movie starts, she is a child. She is in the back seat while her father drives. They are the only two people in the car. I guess kids aren't allowed in the front. I forget that because I was allowed in the front. We also had a car with no seatbelts. Nobody gave a shit. It was the 90s. And so she's in the back seat and she's just kind of like, oh, I don't want to put my boats on the internet for free. She's like just kicking the back of his chair, right? Just boop, 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 boop. Normal, like, bored kid shit, right? But I was immediately, just from the vibes, like, this feels like the Babadook. This feels like the scene in the Babadook when she's got the kid in the back seat and he's kind of having like an autistic meltdown. She starts having a meltdown and they're both like screaming at each other. And it felt shot similarly, though granted I haven't seen the Babadook in years. So the thing is that when it happens in the Babadook, it makes sense. This woman has been running on fumes from the moment this kid was born, because her fucking husband died on the way to her birth, right? And she's just overwhelmed, and she's grief-stricken. She's spread so thin. Of course, she is having this moment of bad parenting, and of course she is in a screaming match with her child. and not being the adult. The dad in Titane is trying to be more composed, but he's just as fed up. And we don't really have any reason for that, right? Like, yeah, she's being a kid, she's being annoying in the backseat, but you're also the parent, and part of your job is on those difficult trips, you are supposed to make them bearable for your child when your child is not old enough to be able to handle it maturely. So, like, you're not doing your job, and then you're pissed off at her for it. And then they get in this accident. She is by far the most affected. You know, he kind of has some bumps and bruises. They have to, like, replace her skull with titanium plate, hence Titane. I'm sure that's French for titanium, or it's French for car baby, one of the two. And then we cut to her many years later. She's like in her early 30s, and she's like a car girl. She has a worker job, right? I don't know that car girls are typically workers, but her job is very sex worker coded. We only see them together in like 2 or 3 more scenes. One of them is that she's just gotten pregnant. She is like leaking car oil. Have I mentioned this movie's gross? I don't know if that's something you could have discerned from the context clues, but this movie's disgusting. Not like the most disgusting movie I've ever seen, but there's a lot of car oil as body fluids going on in this one. So it's kind of like one note gross, but boy howdy is it effective. She's like watching TV, she's like eating breakfast, she's still living with her parents, and something comes up on the news about like serial killers. And like, as the viewers that have watched her for a while, and we have also just watched her kill somebody, kind of rightfully, we don't even know yet whether or not she's a serial killer. And she does, in fact, turn out to be a serial killer. But we get the foreshadowing of that not from her actions, but from the way her father reacts to the news and putting together that he thinks it might be her. There is no reason for him to think that, narratively speaking. We have not been demonstrated anything that is, like, proof that he could have. And yet she ends up doing it. And yet it's not clear, because here's the thing, right? Is that she kills that dude because that dude was being a fucking creep and she was in danger. Everybody else she kills is either about hiding the fact that she is pregnant with a car, or about hiding the fact that she just killed somebody trying to hide that she's pregnant with a car. People talk about this movie and they're just like, oh yeah, she's a serial killer. And it's like, but that's because they're taking, it's like, yeah, yes, she did kill multiple people, but there's a difference between killing multiple people and being a serial killer. Like, serial killers, by definition, like, there's a repetition to what they're doing, right? It is habitual ritual behavior, right? That's not what she's doing. They are all, in her head, acts of self-defense. And the only reason that we, the audience, think that she's a serial killer is because her dad thinks she's a serial killer. And then in the next scene, it's implied that she kills her parents because she's burning the house down. Again, she is destroying any evidence of the car baby. She, like, adopts this teenage boy's identity, gets adopted in by a man who definitely becomes, like, her, like, father in the actual sense. And it's a very masculine world. I don't think it's a coincidence that the car is, like, a very masculine-coded thing. I know it definitely is in American culture. I can't guarantee that it is in French culture as well, but the fact that she The car makes me think that perhaps that is not a coincidence, just a hunch. In running from all of the shit, right? And she ends up in a space where she has like this new father figure, and it is also a very masculine world. Like, it is not just that she has been adopted in by this man. This man happens to have a very mask lifestyle. These are firefighters. These are men amongst men. Like, they are macho. And I don't think it's a coincidence that she, you know, if we're going off of these previous things, I think that it is on theme that she also fucks a fire truck when she feels like the most out of control. She like shows up for her dad as this like complex feminine creature. And from the start, he wants nothing to do with it. And his, like, mistreatment of her creates her into this thing worthy of his mistreatment. She ends up in this, like, completely different environment. She has figured that the whole time the problem was that she was a girl, right? She had just been a boy. This is never said in the text. This is completely my projection, which is funny because I've never been made to feel this way about my dad. But I know it's common, right? Well, you know, okay, there was that time that he tried to teach me how to play fetch, and I would not stop flinching, and after about 20 throws, he got really frustrated and gave up. That time I kind of felt like he wanted a boy, but I think I would have been just as skittish had I been AMAB. I think that was something else. She thinks the problem is her femininity. So she takes on this identity of a man and starts over. At first it was so she could get away, but let's be real, she also doesn't try very hard to get away. Like, she just kind of gets sucked into this world pretty quick. She thinks that, like, she has this new dad's acceptance because she is presenting masculinely and she's doing, like, the dude shit. And you can see why she thinks that. It starts to become more and more apparent that he knows that this is not really his son. He starts basically being like, I accept you for who you are. I love you for who you are. And so she goes like, yeah, bet. She leans back on these sort of like negatively coded feminine behaviors, right? The sexualized and the but empowered and like this like femininity that is like frowned upon. She embodies that because she's just like, oh, you're gonna love me unconditionally, fine. This is what it looks like, motherfucker. Can you do it? And it kind of seems like for a second that he can't. But then he can. I mean, if you see the car as, like, a masculine image, and you see it, this film about her, like, coming to terms with, like, being unconditionally lovable in her feminine form, I don't know how to interpret the ending. My friend thinks that she's, like, reborn as the car baby. I don't know that I agree. Hi there, editing Frankie. Please just get rid of the split screen and just go for the other. Even though the cat's very cute. Just honor that for a second. Anyway, I don't know why I was having trouble putting this thought together when I was, like, doing this video, but there's nothing more feminine than giving birth, Frankie. Like, not to do trans-mask erasure or anything, but it's, like, you know, pretty much the divine feminine. You know, she gives birth, and she is loved through it. He stays with her the whole time. Cares for her baby even when, like, she's gonna be gone, ensuring that that legacy of unconditional love is continued. Duh! Duh, me! The cat's being cute again. Okay, back to the video. So that was my experience of Titane. If you like what you see, if you have enjoyed the you know, meandering, like, comment, subscribe. Go to my Patreon. You know, support my stories. My Instagram and my TikTok, I post Flash on those. I might do some little videos on TikTok, some little experimental things. Stay hydrated, stay gay, fuck a car.